Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is the 73rd part of What If Deku Had a Robot Wolf. I hope you enjoy. Link to the original story and author in the description. Chapter 73, Training Camp Invasion Part 2. The students of 1If thought they had seen the worst this world had to offer, that the USJ and the Children of Blood were the worst this world had to offer. They were wrong. They were so wrong. It all started as normally as any other day, starting off the day with a fun activity before training. It was exciting. Then that thing showed up. Achiko felt it first. An overwhelming feeling of dread, fear, and hunger. A feeling she had only been told about by roles. A feeling she prayed that she would never feel. Prayers that ended up being unanswered. Soon after that, the others started to feel it. A horrific sense of dread that horrified them to their very souls. Then that thing showed itself. It wore the body of a man wearing Hummerai's robes. Yet underneath that skin was a thing, a soul-devouring monster. An unholy freak of nature. Everyone was frozen in fear the moment they saw it. A few of her classmates tried to attack it soon after they saw it but were sent flying with but a wave of its arm. The rest of the class tried to fight it soon afterwards, but they too were sent flying. They didn't even touch it. They didn't even get close. Which was probably a good thing, since that thing could rip their souls from their bodies with a mere touch. Because this was no man, but a thing. A soul-devouring monster. An unnatural, eldritch being. For it was a heretic. Only Durandal was unaffected by that thing's presence. Being a machine, he was immune to its unnatural presence. That did not mean he was immune to the heretic's telekinesis. As such, he was getting thrown around just as much as everyone else was. Foolish children, the heretic said. Do you not know what you face? A quirkiest arsehole? Hitoshi replied with a slight smirk. Fool, the heretic said, quickly followed by Hitoshi getting the mother of all headaches. Do you really think you could stop me with your pathetic excuse for a mind control quirk? I can do far more than you could ever do. Hitoshi groaned. Worth a shot, he muttered before he collapsed onto his side. Seems like this thing was not only immune to his quirk, but the kickback from trying to brainwash it was killer. He would not be trying that again. The other students weren't doing much better. Half of them were on the ground, lacking the strength to get back up. Getting thrown around by this villain into what felt like every tree in the surrounding area had broken them. They were just unable to fight anymore. 5 minutes, that's how long it took him to take out half the class and come close to taking out the other half. He didn't even touch anyone, he just threw them into trees. Those who could still stand were struggling to find the strength to continue to fight. This thing's mere presence was sapping their strength and their will. It was just too terrifying to fight. Like staring down an eldritch being. Like you could stop me, the heretic said as it eyed its prize. Achiko felt cold as the heretic's gaze fell on her. She knew the body the heretic was in was fully human, meaning that it was not only after her soul, but her body as well. That's what she was to it. A spare body. Just like how her father saw her. I will not let you hurt her, Izumi said through gritted teeth as she stood between Achiko and the heretic. Unlike the others, she quickly caught on as to why this thing was here. She knew it was here for Achiko, and she would not let it take her. Izumi's defiance was rewarded with a telekinetic shove into a tree. Like you can stop me, the heretic said. I will take what is mine by divine right. She's our classmate, our friend, Hanta said as he struggled to stand up. We are not going to abandon her. The rest of the class struggled to their feet, but got to their feet they did. This was one of their own they were protecting. They were not going to allow this thing to take her. The heretic chucked. You think this thing you call unity will help you defeat me? Well, let's see if I can shatter that unity you oh so rely on. Momo Yaoyorozu, the rich girl with the unfair advantage over everyone else due to her wealth, who practically brought her recommendation spot. Inase Yarashi, the son of a scientist who never really took an interest in the sciences, and was considered a disappointment by his brother because of it. Hitoshi Shinso, the outcast who's responsible for his mother being stuck in a coma. Nito Monoma, the friend who hides his hatred of his friend for developing a quirk. Denki Kaminari, the idiot who cheated to pass UA's written exam. Tenya Ida, the younger brother who thinks he'll never measure up to his older brother. Tsuyu Azui, the mutant who eats raw meat not because she has to, but because she likes to. Hantasiro, the son of a psychopath who changed his own name so he could distance himself from his villainous parents. Koji Koda, the silent boy who's terrified of insects, not because people find it creepy, but because of the things the bugs tell him to do. Toru Hagakure, the invisible girl who despises her own quirk and wishes she was born with another. Kyoka Jiro, the musician who knows everyone's secrets thanks to her quirk. Yui Kodai, the quiet girl who can use her quirk on people, but refuses to use her quirk on people because she accidentally killed her parents with it. Mina Ashido, the cheerful girl who can't bring herself to confess to her crush due to her love of eating rotten meat. Fumikichi Tokoyami, the raven who only does his creature of the dark routine because he's ashamed of what he did in his past. Eijiro Kirishima, the manly boy who knows that a girl is crushing on him, but can't bring himself to tell her that he's gay. Rikido Sato, the boy who despises his own father for inheriting the man's hypoglycemia, resulting in him having problems with his quirk that his mother lacks. Himiko Toga, the monster who murdered her own parents, just to drink their blood. Mei Hatsum, the insane inventor who wishes that her real mother was alive and that she wasn't being looked after by her fake mother. Chihiro Kazuki, the disgruntled daughter who refused to believe how much of a horrible human being her father truly was. Achiko Uraraka, the human Semitic hybrid who was ashamed of her alien heritage, all because her father followed the true path mother set down before us. And Izumi Midoriya, the quirkless girl who ended her own life, only to come back to suffer again and again. Whose mechanical companion is a robot built by Paxton, and possesses a device that allows him to emulate other people's quirks. Whose own quirk, one for all, is not her own, and is only holding on to it for its true owner, All Might. Izumi felt her heart sink. No, she thought, panicking. Her breathing skyrocketed. The thing, this heretic, just divulged everything about her. About One for All, about Durandal. About her suicide attempt. They all knew. They all knew the truth. Her classmates, her friends. They all knew. They all knew. Wait a minute. Minoru suddenly shouted. Where's my dark secret? You completely skipped over me. Everyone turned towards the short, gray-haired boy, shocked and confused looks on their faces. Minoru! We have bigger things to worry about here. Tenya shouted, chopping his arm. I know. Minoru shouted. I am well aware that we are facing down an eldritch being that can quite clearly kill us all and can read our minds. But I feel there has been a great disservice towards me. He skipped over me when divulging everyone's dark secret. Now why is that? Do I have nothing worth mentioning? The heretic just stared at him with a confused look, confused by the boy's audacity. No, he said calmly. They already know you're a perverted piece of shit. What more do they need to know? Minoru looked dumbfounded. Seriously, that's it? That's all you can say about me? Aren't you supposed to be fucking evil or something? I am not looking deeper into that disgusting thing you call a mind, the heretic said, sounding unimpressed. Wait, you didn't look into my mind because it disgusted you? Minoru said, looking annoyed. You uncultured swine. Jaws dropped. No one expected Minoru of all people to just insult this eldritch being like that. Achiko especially was shocked because he just insulted a powerful heretic. The kind of being that gives people nightmares, and he just insulted it by calling him a swine. Talk about taunting Cthulhu, Denki murmured. When the fuck did you grow a pair? Hitoshi asked. You are, hello. Minoru said, pointing at his hair. I grow balls on my head. Of course I would eventually grow a pair. The heretic glared at him. You will die for that insult. Then I die braver than you will ever be. Minoru retorted, his legs visibly trembling. He did not mean to insult an eldritch being that could snap him like a twig, but, fuck it. If he's going to die, then he's going to do it after insulting the fucker. He just hoped that heaven was full of hot, scantily clad angel women. The heretic charged Minoru, only to suddenly collapse onto the floor, violently coughing up blood. Why, are you humans so weak? He cursed, spitting up more blood. The students could only watch as the heretic collapsed and struggled to get back to his feet. What's wrong with him? Mina asked, sounding worried. I don't know, Hitoshi said. Durandal then started to laugh, a crazed, maniacal laugh. The same laugh as his creators. You idiot. You fucking incompetent moron. You just had to reveal the existence of the quirk emulator, didn't you? You dumbass. Why, are you laughing? The heretic asked. I just revealed everything about you. About your creator, about your quirk emulator. So why is that so funny to you? Because, Durandal laughed before he used the MIWR to bring out the chainsaw and attached it to his tail. I no longer have to hide it from them. He boosted before he activated the quirk emulator, and used a quirk he had never told Izumi he had, for this very purpose. Nullzone, the quirk belonging to the guy who controlled the Nomu back during the Children of Blood's attack on the Team Ida 10 agency. The same quirk that nullified Roll's telepathic ability. The man's blood did splatter all over the place after all, including onto Durandal. In an instant, the horrifying presence surrounding the heretic vanished, allowing them to think clearly without the overwhelming few that was consuming them. But that wasn't all that happened. Unknown to 1A, all the puppets the heretic was controlling all collapsed, the telepathic link to their puppeteer severed. Much to the relief of the exhausted students and teachers who had been fighting them. Durandal then rushed forward and swung the chainsaw at the man's neck. Only for it to instantly stop when it hit him. A spiraling wave of energy formed from the opposite side. Oh, you rat bastard, Durandal cursed before he was sent flying backwards into a tree. Fuckface has a reflect quirk. Anything physical that hits him is reflected back. Seriously, it has two quirks. Ijiro gasped as the heretic's fearsome presence returned, but it was much, much weaker than before. They weren't frozen in fear anymore, but they were still scared of the thing. We couldn't hit it in the first place, and now we find out that even if we do land a hit it'll just be reflected back at us. Momo quavered. How were they supposed to beat something so powerful? Fools, the heretic said as he stood up. Why do you think I chose this body out of all those available to me? Flecturn's quirk is the perfect defensive quirk. It is a shame that I won't be able to harvest this body's genetic material for later use. My master would just love a power like this. But, once I am done here, it won't matter. No one will be able to stop M. It said before it suddenly grabbed its ears and screamed. Gods, do you ever shut up? Kyoka asked, blasting the thing with sound waves from a speaker she was leaning against, courtesy of Momo. Clearly Reflect didn't work on sound waves, otherwise, it wouldn't be able to hear anything. Everyone run now! Izumi shouted as she picked up Ochiko and ran. Don't need to tell me twice. Minoru shouted as he and anyone else who could stand ran away from that thing, picking up those who were unable to get up themselves. They could not fight that thing. So, the only thing they could do was run. Ran far and fast, and hoped that they could outrun that thing. Kyoka, come on. Denki said, tapping his girlfriend's shoulder. Got it. Kyoka replied before she disconnected her jacks from the speaker. Denki then picked her up and carried her away as fast as he could. Avoiding the balls Minoru was wieldily throwing behind him. As the students ran, they could feel the heretic's anger rise. It felt horrifying, insidious, suffocating. Hungry. The heretic launched forwards, moving at an unnatural speed towards Izumi. Arm outstretched towards Ochiko, only for Durandal to get in the way. His body turned a luminescent light blue. Huh, funny, Durandal remarked. Reflect is an emitter-type quirk, not a mutation type like I thought it would be. And I can emulate it, bitch. The heretic had about a second to realize its mistake before it was sent flying back, hit by the same amount of force it had jumped forward with. Unfortunately, Reflect did not reflect attacks that were reflected back at it. Keep moving, Durandal shouted, deactivating the emulator. He needed to use it sparingly if he wanted to keep him away from the students. Enough! The heretic shouted, using his powers to instantly bring itself to its feet. Instantly, everyone's legs snapped. Several of them screamed in pain as they collapsed, their legs broken and unable to support their bodies. Even Durandal and Isaac's legs were broken, just to stop them from interfering. You are going to pay for that. The heretic growled, blood dripping out of its mouth. It was done playing around. Back with the teachers. Kana and Shota were busy trying to wake the unconscious villains whilst Mandalay, Pixie Bob and Tiger checked on Ragdoll and Blossom, with Inko tending to Shuichi's wounds. Helping Ragdoll was the priority for the other pussycats because, without her, there was no way they could find the students. This, of course, did not go unnoticed by the heretic. Using the eyes of one of his puppets, it was able to witness these fools as they tried to revive that which was already dead. The heretic lacked the strength to regain control of all of its puppets now. The human body it was inhabiting was horrendously weak, and was only getting weaker by the second. But, it would be trivial to take over one of them for a few moments. One of the villains, the man who could shoot trigger-laced needles, suddenly moved and fired several needles at Eri before collapsing. All but one of the needles missed her, and the one that did hit only scratched her cheek. But that was all it needed, as a small amount of trigger got into her system. The young girl's body twitched as the small amount of trigger moved through her body and empowered her quirk. She felt what little control over her quirk slipped away. The energy she uses to rewind things threatening to let loose. Eri, Kota said, sounding worried as he slowly reached out to his friend. Get away from her! Blossom suddenly shouted, leaping forward in a burst of cherry blossom. She grabbed Eri and shot deep into the forest, getting as far away as possible before the girl's quirk went haywire. The area around her was suddenly consumed by a bright white light. The light was so bright that Shota was unable to erase it. Not that it would have worked. Erasure has issues erasing someone's quirk when they're on trigger. Eri telepathically screamed as her quirk went haywire, her cries heard for miles around her. The teachers and Inko could only stand back and watch, unable to approach without being affected by Eri's quirk. Everyone heard her screams. But it did its job and kept the heroes occupied a bit longer. Which was all it needed. Izumi cried, crawling across the ground and trying desperately to drag Achiko away from that thing. She could hear Eri cry in her mind. She did not know why she was crying, but she sounded like she was in great pain. She wanted to be there, to find out what was wrong and help her, but her legs were broken and she had to get Achiko to safety. Her girlfriend may be the only one whose legs weren't broken, but that thing's presence was paralyzing her. She had to get Achiko away from that thing. Izumi suddenly let out a horrific scream as she felt her left arm snap, bending in ways it was not supposed to. Your defiance is foolish, the heretic said. To think such pathetic life forms could stop me. It said as it walked towards Achiko. Get away from her, you dash. Himiko shouted as she charged the heretic with a knife, only for it to reach out towards her and stop her in her tracks. Himiko choked as she was lifted up off the ground, grasping at her throat as she struggled to breathe. I am starting to get tired of you, the heretic growled before it clenched its fist. In an instant, Himiko was reduced to a ball of meat and bone. Himiko! Sue shouted, tears pooling around her eyes at the death of her friend. The rest of the class was frozen in horror at the display of power. How easily that thing was able to kill Himiko. It was at that moment that they realized that this thing was toying with them and that it could kill them as easily as breathing. Fear gave way to sorrow. Ants, all of you, the heretic growled, blood dripping from its mouth and Himiko's remains fell to the ground. You bastard! Izumi shouted as she sent forth Black Whip to grab the heretic, having finally gotten it under control. Only for the heretic to grab the tendrils and pull them in hard, sending Izumi flying towards it. Its other hand reached out to grab her. Izumi! Achiko shouted, reaching out towards Izumi, trying to pull her back. Sorrow gave way to anger. Izumi's body went limp the moment the heretic grabbed her face. The light in her eyes faded. The heretic snarled as he discarded Izumi's body off to the side, allowing it to roll for a bit before it came to a stop. Her blank eyes staring at nothing. Unmoving, unblinking. A lifeless, soulless husk. Achiko froze, her mouth open in horror. She felt that thing consume Izumi's soul. In an instant she was gone, everything that made Izumi who she was gone. Consumed. Taken away from her. Anger gave way to hatred. Achiko snarled as she glared at the heretic, with pure hatred in her eyes. Heretic! She fumed, standing up and turning to face that monster. Her eyes started to glow. I will cut you down. Break you apart, splay the gore of your profane form across the stars. I will grind you down until the very atoms cry for mercy. My hands shall relish ending you. Here. And. Now. The heretic covered its face with its arms as it was hit by a telekinetic blast. A very strong telekinetic blast. Almost like someone threw a wall at it. The heretic recovered quickly and looked up at Achiko, and was shocked by what it saw. 6 pink wings made from pure psychic energy unfilled out of Achiko's back, with the same pink energy engulfing her arms. But the energy was unstable and erratic, resulting in the wings looking rough. Achiko yelled as she charged the heretic, angrily swiping her arms at it with blind anger. There was no strategy, no thought process other than kill, and utterly no mercy. Only rage. The heretic, for its part, was able to avoid Achiko's wild swipes easily. But it was angry. Angry that its new body's current resident was being a fool, destroying a perfectly usable body for something as petty as vengeance. But it was also impressed. That body must contain great power to be able to use such a powerful technique without technological aid. And 6 wings. Only a rare few are capable of that. But if she keeps this up, she'll ruin it. It couldn't take the body whilst she was in this state either. Its foot suddenly stepped on something. It growled when it realized what it had stepped on, one of Minoru's sticky balls. They weren't as sticky as they could be, but they were sticky enough to cause him problems. Achiko used this opportunity to its fullest and punched the heretic in the chest with all her might. The heretic, confident that its body's quirk would protect it, did not try to deflect it. Unfortunately, at the very last moment before Achiko's fist connected with its chest, its quirk vanished. Durandal glared at the heretic, his quirk emulator active and emulating erasure. Without reflect to protect it, the punch to the heretic connected without anything to reflect it back at Achiko. A blinding light consumed it, forcing everyone to cover their eyes. When the light eventually dimmed and vanished, there was no sign of the heretic, and all the trees behind it were gone. Achiko breathed heavily as she gazed upon the destruction she had caused. Her eyes fluttered before she collapsed onto the ground, her wings vanishing, but leaving nasty burns on both her arms and her back. The class was speechless, shocked by Achiko's overwhelming display of power. None of them had even suspected that she was capable of unleashing such power. Is it dead? Minoru asked shakily, hoping that the thing was indeed dead. Fool! The voice of the heretic said, causing everyone to freeze as the thing landed on the ground on wings of fire. Its quirk reactivated, but its body was heavily damaged. But it was still alive, yet weakened. What was previously a life expectancy of a good number of hours had been reduced to mere minutes. It needed to finish this up now. You tried to fight me with a power you can barely control, for what? A dead girl. And now all you've done is damage a perfectly usable body, it said as it walked over to its prize and picked up Achiko's unconscious body. His free hand shot out and snapped Himiko's neck, who had regenerated and snuck up behind him with a knife.
Did you really think I didn't know about your ability to regenerate? It asked.
How foolish of you. As if the same strategy would work on me twice, it said before it focused back on its new host.
Now, serve the purpose for which you were created for.
It said before something touched its back. Confused by the sudden feeling, the heretic turned around and was surprised by what it saw. Izumi floated behind him. Head held low, an arm outstretched towards its back. What was shocking most of all was that it didn't detect her. There were no brainwaves, no thoughts, no memories.
Nothing.
What? The heretic gasped, a confused look on its face. She's brain dead, she can't be able to move without someone making her move.
Who's puppeting you?
No one is puppeting me, Izumi replied, a smirk on her face.
I am very much still alive.
The heretic scowled before it reached out with its mind, only to suddenly cough up a mouthful of blood. Its body suddenly started to rapidly fall apart from the inside.
What did you do to me?
I just put your heart into reverse, Izumi replied coldly.
The human body is not designed for its heart to beat backwards, you see.
There are valves inside of our blood vessels to keep blood flowing the right way. Send it the other way, however, and they'll all bust. And I'm pretty sure not even you can survive the sheer amount of trauma caused by every valve in your vascular system rupturing. Especially in your current state, she said as she looked up at him, her eyes were a salmon-like pink. Oh, and don't worry about Izumi, she continued with a smile.
One for all won't let its ninth inheritor die that easily.
The heretic coughed up more blood before it collapsed, the heretic's vascular system rupturing. The trauma resulted in a catastrophic failure of his body, killing it. The heretic was able to keep itself alive despite its body being dead, but only for a few seconds. In a last-ditch effort, it reached out towards Achiko in one last attempt to take what belonged to it, only for its new body to be dragged out of its reach by Black Whip. Burn in whatever place you call hell, freak, was the last thing it heard before its powers faltered, and finally died.
OHYOUOFMINE. Izumi looked at the collapsed remains of the heretic.
She blinked a few times before her eyes returned to her usual emerald green.
She then collapsed onto the ground right next to Achiko. Izumi!
Hitoshi shouted before he crawled over to her as fast as he could. He had no idea what the hell just happened, but something had happened to his friend, and he needed to make sure she was alright.
Momo, make a flare gun and shoot it up into the air. Kyoka suddenly said.
There are helicopters approaching us. Momo nodded before she rolled onto her back, created a flare gun, and shot it into the air. A few moments later the sound of helicopter propellers started to fill the air, getting closer and closer.
For Lambda-class quad-tilt rotor helicopters, operating as part of the WHA's Special Hero Service, Durandal said, tracking the 4 helicopters as they approached. Looks like someone called in the big guns. Funny, they must have been close by. I only sent a distress call 10 minutes ago.
When did you send a distress call?
Toru asked.
When that guy showed up, Durandal replied, pointing at the heretic's body with his tail. Had to turn off airplane mode, but considering the danger we were in, I saw it necessary to maximize our chances of survival. Hitoshi nodded before he rolled onto his back and looked upwards, just as several large transport helicopters flew overhead.
One of the helicopters stopped above them, above the small clearing Achiko had created.
Several robots with white bodies and the WHA logo on the shoulders deployed out of the helicopter's sides by rope, followed by a hero wearing sinister-looking dark purple and red armor. Hitoshi breathed a sigh of relief. For the first time in his life, he was actually glad to see a robot. That will be it for this part. I hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and comment if you want part 74.
If you want to hear more from me, subscribe. I hope to see you all in the next one.